What is your full name?
Wanis Conrad Paris.
And why did your parents select this name for you?
Well, they really didn't. What they selected was Cecil Conrad Paris.
Well, what's the story?
Well, my mother registered me in school as Wanis because she was thinking about naming me Wanis, and my understanding is that she was playing with names, trying to come up with different names. And of course, you know, there was 9 in our family, so I think what she did was she was playing with Juanita, and in the process of doing that, she came up with Wanis and never officially named me that. But then, when I was a senior, I think in high school, I went and had my name changed to Wanis. So figured everybody was calling me that, then it should be my name.
Do you have a nickname?
Yes, Gib.
Why?
Well, and I don't know this, but my understanding is that there was a logger that I was sort of interested in, and I sort of took after him, and his last name was Gibbs, or I think it was Gibbs, and so my dad nicknamed me Gibbs. Gib.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Coleman in January the 18th, 1942.
Where in Coleman?
Coleman Hospital.
Okay. Do you know how your family came to live in this area?
No, I know my mother was an Earwood, and she was, in the Arab areas where her family was from, and in the Paris family, I think I'm not sure, but I think maybe they might have migrated from Ohio area into this area, but I'm not absolutely sure about it.
So, did you grow up in the same house your whole life?
No. Dad built the house that we grew up in, and then we rented a farmhouse from, I think it was the Williams, and it was probably 2 miles north of where our home was at, still in the Providence community, and between the two places, that's where we grew up.
Did your house, your primary house where you grew up, did it have electricity, indoor plumbing, telephones?
Not to begin with, and when I left home, we actually didn't have indoor bathrooms, but I think I was probably maybe between 6 and 7 years old before we had electricity. And because there was no electricity that came the road where we lived. And of course, I think indoor plumbing, we never had indoor plumbing. Even when I was 18 years old, we had to go out and draw the water out of a well that my dad had hand dug. And so we never really had indoor plumbing while I was at home.
What is your earliest childhood memory?
Probably when I was maybe 6 in the first grade. I mean, there's a few memories before that, but none of any significance. I do remember, when we started to school, and quite a bit from that, but not a whole lot before that.
Were there any special times in the house that you remember?
Well, I mean, we always had Sundays or weekends were always sort of special at our house because the cousins and all the relatives and everybody would always come out to visit on the weekends, and so the weekends were always sort of special. And of course in the summertime those were always special because their cousins from Birmingham mainly would come out. Birmingham or Chattanooga would come out and spend time with us in the summers. They'd work with us and play with us, and so we had those were special times.
Were there any special items in the house that you remember? Things that stand out?
You know, I probably, you know, we always heated with coal. So, I mean, I vividly remember the coal stove because when I was, I don't know, maybe 7th grade through maybe high school in that area, I had to, it was one of my jobs, just get up in the morning and stoke the, you know, put coal in and stoke the stove in the wintertime. But probably the dining table, because we'd always sat down together and had just a big table where everybody gathered around the table and ate, and we had a pretty strict policy, or the family did, that if you didn't eat when you sat down to eat, you didn't eat until the next meal, so it was pretty strict.
And you had chores, and what were they?
When the boys, for the main part, had you know, worked the fields. The girls worked the fields too, but we mainly had to, you know, take care of the cattle and the cows and the mules and stuff. So we would always have to get up early in the morning, and on a school day, we would get up about somewhere around 5 o'clock, and we would have to go milk the cows and feed the mules and everything, and then we'd get ready for school, and of course we, you know, after the 6th grade, then we caught school buses. Before the 6th grade we had to walk to school, but then we would get home in the afternoon, and of course we'd go back, work in the fields and do whatever needed to be done, and then we would have to go milk the cows and feed the mules again and everything before, you know, we'd go to bed. And Dad and Mom usually were in the bed by dark, so usually that was the rule that they were. We didn't necessarily have to, but that was shortly after that we would be in the bed.
Well, was there any way for you to make money as a grown up or as a teenager, and if so, how, and would you spend it on?
Well, not until really working on the farm. You know, you didn't make any money or anything, but when we got into high school, then we sort of, you know, learned how to work on the weekends and stuff, and I worked at a gas station, and we'd do car washes, fill cars up with gas, and service cars and stuff, and so that was their spending money when I was in high school. When I was probably, before I started to school at all, then on the Williams farm that we were farming, then I was a water boy, and I would carry water around to the guys that were plowing the fields, and they were plowing the fields at that time with mules, and so I would carry water around to them, and of course I'd make enough money to go buy candy or something, but that was about it.
What was school like as a child? Where did you go to school, and what were your best and worst subjects?
Started at Providence, and we had 2 grades in each class, and you know, of course, reading and writing and stuff was what mainly you were there to learn, and then mathematics later. We had to memorize our multiplication tables and everything. And then when we went to Vinemont, when we graduated from the 6th grade at Providence, and we started at Vinemont, and of course that was a little bit different because a bigger school and everything, and some of the kids that we had went to Providence with transferred to Eva, and some of them went to Vinemont. So it was some different groups of people and stuff. So you of course, social studies, math, reading, writing. I never was into sports a whole lot because with the farming activities and everything, you never had a lot of time to spend before or after school or anything, so never really got into sports to any degree.
Did you have any childhood heroes when you were growing up?
Probably, when we were kids, before we ever got a TV or anything, we would ride over to Des Moines, which was probably 3/4 of a mile from our house, and of course we'd watch westerns, and you'd develop some heroes there that you'd sort of, you'd say, wow, that'd be great to be something like that someday, but no, not really. Your school teachers, you'd have certain school teachers that you would picture how their life was because they knew so much and everything, and you would think that from time to time you'd think they were sort of an idol for you and everything. So, but no, not really.
Was there religion growing up, and if so, what church, and did you attend, and what was that like?
Mother was very religious, and we would go to church, on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and if we didn't have a car to get there, we'd walk. So she was very religious, and she taught us a lot of values and everything. Dad at the time was not so religious, but was an honest, good person that taught you a lot of values without having to do a lot of teaching. He did it more from examples, probably more than anything. And he taught us not to be a drunk because he drank a lot, and that was one thing that we said, okay, we don't want to do that. It was a quality that we saw that we didn't like. So I think from examples, I think we probably learned more than any other way.
Now, what year did you say you were born in?
1942.
And your brother Gerald, what year was he born in?
He was born 2 years before, so he was born in 1940.
So he was the oldest male?
Yeah, Gerald was the oldest male.
Describe typical family breakfast, dinner, supper.
Yeah, breakfast usually, we raised most everything that we had to eat, so I think I can remember when Mom and Dad would go to the grocery store and they would buy flour, salt, and pepper, and that was about it. It was like $2 or $3 a week. Everything else we pretty well raised, so for breakfast you could have eggs, you could have biscuits was a pretty normal thing, gravy was a pretty normal thing, and if you wanted meats, you could have whatever, and most of our bacon would be smoked bacon because we had a smokehouse, and Dad would smoke the meat. And then for lunch, of course, in the summertime, we were all working in the fields and everything, and Mother would fix lunch, or fix dinner, we called it, and then we would have dinner, and usually there was a lot of, we'd always have cornbread for lunch, and then for supper that night, then we would have, leftovers, usually, and those leftovers a lot of times would be cornbread and milk, and and then other things that was left over with it.
Okay. What is the oldest relative you remember, and what do you remember about him?
Probably, it would have probably been my grandmother,
Which one?
Gay, and she was Dixie Gay, and she was. I remember spending the night with her. I remember that they had a tin roof house, and it was always, you'd always want to go spend the night with them, especially when it was raining, because I don't know, a tin roof with rain coming down and everything was, it was sort of relaxing. And so we would spend the night, and I can always remember at night we'd sit around the fireplace if it was wintertime, and she would sit there and comb her hair. She had this stool that she'd put in the front of a mirror, and she'd sit there and stroke her hair for a half hour. It seemed like it was a long time always, but we were always talking in the process. And she had a Victrola there, and occasionally we would put on a record, and we'd have music. And she had this wood stove with a big oven on the back of it, and in the summer times we would, when we were working the fields and stuff, we would always go through her house, and she'd always have a apple pie or cherry pie or a cake or something on the back of the stove, and of course we always helped herself, and she knew we would, and she always baked them for us. So, and I also remember the letters that she used to write to my Uncle Pete, and she'd let me sit down sometime and read those letters, and you could read them, and it was just like she wrote such a letter that it was almost just like you were there. So it was.
Do you still have those letters, or does he?
I don't know if anybody has those letters anymore, because Uncle Pete's dead, and I don't know if anybody has them or not.
That might be kind of interesting.
It would be.
You weren't the first person to say that.
Yeah.
So I don't know who to ask, but maybe you could ask around.
You might ask I think Aunt Loretta is dead now too, though I'm not sure about that. But I know that she would be a person that would know, and I don't know who else would. If Juanita or Janie don't know, then I don't know who else would.
Then let's talk a little bit later. You and I have talked a little bit about this in the past, but why did you leave Coleman, and how did you wind up in Michigan?
Gerald and I, our Uncle Pete had come down, and I had just graduated from high school, and I don't think Gerald or myself, either one, at that time wanted to be a farmer, because we knew that life, and at least we thought we knew it, and to what the rewards were and everything. And we had a thrust. Our dad had went to Michigan and worked at Buick Motors, and with our Uncle Pete for a couple of winters and stuff, and we thought we would like to go to Michigan. And
was this where in Michigan did Gerald, and where did your dad go?
Flint, Michigan.
Okay, so they went like Motor City.
Yeah, they went to Motor City, and of course that's where our Uncle Pete and Aunt Loretta lived, so we went. Gerald and I went up there, and we stayed with them for a certain period of time, and we worked, a couple of different jobs there and stuff, and then we had an uncle in Niles, Uncle Mark, and so things were sort of tough in the early 60s in the automotive industry, and they weren't really hiring or anything, which was probably good for us in a way. But we migrated to Niles, and I went to work in a hardware store, and Gerald was he went to work as a truck driver for Henco. And then later on, I went to work after 2 years, I think, of working at a hardware store. Then I went to work for Henco, and we were making aircraft parts. and it was a little bit different than what we had been taught and trained to be and everything. But I wound up working there for 15 years. Gerald wound up coming back to Alabama, and I think he was there 3 years. I may be wrong with that 3 years, but I think it was 3 years.
How did you feel the first time you found out you were going to be a parent?
You know, it was a joyous occasion, you know, and you were tickled about being a parent, and you were looking forward to raising, you know, your children the best you could, you know, and providing for them and everything. And that was, you talk about that. Gerald did get married while he was in Michigan, and I rethinking that a little bit. It was more than 3 years that he was there, because he did get married and stuff while he was there, and so, but he was married quite a bit before I was, and I think I was 21, 22 when I got married, and I went up there when I was 18.
Okay. What are your children's names, and why did you choose them?
Just picked out names, you know, but Jeffrey is my oldest son, and he's Jeffrey Brian Paris, and of course my mother and dad would come up and visit with us, and he was super hyper at that time when he was young, you know, and before he was 1 or 2 or so, and so mother would say he was a handful. So, but he was an enjoyable young man, and he did break his arm one time with a bicycle. I can't remember. I don't think he did that when mother and them were there. But then Keith Allen Paris, that was their second son. And Keith was, he was a good young man, and he was quite active too and everything, and they were all, you know, sort of a pleasure. And then we wanted a girl, so we had Michelle Renee, and of course she was Daddy's girl, and we always had a lot of fun together, and it was sort of special. If you had boys and you had girls, you'd sort of, you know, the girls have always got Daddy's heart, you know, so it was, but it was a lot of fun.
What are some of your proudest moments as a parent?
Probably seeing the kids be self-sufficient, able to earn a living, able to be honest, not on drugs, just capable of living life, you know. And didn't take a lot to satisfy me, because I knew where I'd come from and how I had grown up and what I had to do to learn to make a living, and it was just seeing them be self-sufficient.
You know, you and I have talked a little bit about this in terms of your move to the north, which is probably very different than down here. Mm-hmm. I believe you mentioned to me that you could either be a farmer or a merchant, and you didn't want to be a merchant, you wanted to be a farmer, and your dad had worked up north, maybe your uncles and stuff. And so, what was that like the first time you got in a car or a truck or a bus or whatever and went up north and knew you weren't coming back for a little while? And like,
well, you know, I was anxious in a way, because, you know, you'd heard your dad and your uncle and everything talk about, you know, working in industry and stuff, and seemed like they had a good life and that they were able to, you know, buy things that they wanted, and farming back then, you were self-supporting and had the things that you really needed, but as a young kid you didn't really realize how much you had. So you were looking forward to that life that was different, and which later on now, I'd love to go back and be a farmer, but it was, you choose what you want to do, and you go do the best you can do with it.
You've started your own business. How long have you had your business?
We started our business in December of 1978.
1978.
Yep.
34 years.
Yep. Yeah.
Why'd you start your business?
Well, I was a supervisor, a plant supervisor, and I'd went through all the steps and everything at Henco where Gerald and I started. And I had been in charge of a production line. I had been in charge of quality. I'd been in charge of sales and all of the different function purchasing. But it always seemed like that everything fell to me, to make things work or to do something, but yet it wasn't my business. And we never got an opportunity as employees to buy that company when it was sold to another company. And I just thought, well, if I'm going to start a business, it's time to do it by the time I was 35 or so. And so we went to work for another person for a year because he told me he would give me half of his business if I'd come to work for him. And I was skeptical enough because the guy built palletizing machines and stuff, and I was skeptical enough to say, let's try it for a year and see how it works, and if it works out all right, that would be great. But after a year, I got a call from one of the customers that we had done business with at Henco, and they said, look, we can't find a group of guys that can do work for us like you guys did, and we'd like for you to go start your own business and do work for us. So we did. We went and started our own business.
Okay, last three questions I've asked all your brothers and sisters this. Of all the things you've learned from your parents, what do you feel was the most valuable?
Probably I would have to say honesty. I think that our parents, I think they could have shook your hand, they could have told you something, and whatever they did, that's the way it was. And you could depend on it. You didn't have to worry about it. So I would say probably the biggest thing for me was honesty.
What accomplishment or accomplishments are you most proud of?
For myself? Well, that's raised my kids. They didn't go to jail. They weren't on drugs, and they are all self-sufficient and everything. That's probably my most proudest thing that I can say. As far as myself, I've always had to work harder, I think, than most people to accomplish things. And so therefore, I think that the hard work ethics that I was taught by my mother and my dad, I think probably helped me to succeed, because I never give up. I work at whatever I'm doing, and I keep after it. I don't give up on it. I may be slower, but I'll get there.
Lastly, in terms about you, if some way 3 generations from now, your great grandchildren get an opportunity to see this, what is the one thing you want them and most people, what you most want them to remember about you?
I think I'm an honest person. I think I work hard. I don't think I give up, and I think I love my family. and I participate in family activities and stuff because I know that you have to do that to keep a family going. It don't just keep going. And I would like for them to know that, I did that, and I've worked hard at it, and I think that our family, the Parrish family, I think has had our family reunions. We've got together, and I think we're pretty loyal to keeping that going. I think that's probably a direct result of her mother and the training that she gave us.
Family is important. My observation is family is very important to you, this family, because you always come down, you always drive the farthest. Mm-hmm. So I don't recall you ever not being here. The thing that I want to explore is your success as an entrepreneur. Okay, so just in terms of background, you started your organization in 1978, 34 years ago. Very few businesses that were started in 1978 are still around. I suspect you've had some ups and downs. If you had to do it all over again, would you start your business?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I think there's people that would not be happy if they didn't put forth in the world of work, as I would call it, their best effort to do the most and best that they can. And yeah, I would start my business again. I think I gave up a lot in my family life because of me being slower maybe to accomplish things than maybe a lot of people would. So maybe I had to work a lot more hours. I'm not sure about that, than what most people do. Most business people, or most people think that business people have a easy life. But I think it's a little bit more difficult than to direct and to make things happen and keep things going than what most people understand. And the reward is good, but I think you earn it, and I think you have to work for it. And at some point in that process, I think it becomes you have a work family. Now, you have to take care of that work family like you do your own family.
Would you agree with the statement there are people that have made a lot more money in the last 34 years not being entrepreneurs, like being salespeople or stockbrokers or things like that, but there's a different kind of joy through work that you get in your own business?
Yeah, I think you have the ability to help other people to earn a living. And I think being a stockbroker, you have the ability to make a lot of money quick. But I think that probably that lifelong reward of knowing people and working with people is a lot different. And I think that deep inside, I think that feeling is a different feeling.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Why do people such as yourself still have your business, still go to work for that business, even though you can probably sell that business to an investment banking group?
The people that depend on you. I think that, and enjoying what you do. I enjoy what I do. And I think that if I were not working, I don't think I would enjoy it as much as I do working. I'm 71 years old. And I work because, not that I have to work, because I want to work. So, and I know people depend on us. And I think that Jan and I both probably feel that way, that we could have quit work several years ago. We could have sold the business. We could have done whatever. But money's not really a priority for me.
That is such a different philosophy than what people are taught in schools. Now it's all about building intellectual property or something and then selling out. And if you were speaking to an entrepreneur who just was 2 years out of school, he had some very good education, had a little bit of work experience, and had a business, why should he or she keep that business instead of cash out?
First of all, you gotta love what you do. And if you like what you do, someday you will be a professional in what you do. You may not look at yourself that way, but someday you will be the go-to person for that business activity, whatever it might be. You know, in their particular case, it's machining. And a lot of people rely on you, customers, other people, to share some of that. You could say give back a little bit of what you got from other people in your life, you know, that made you successful. And I guess living and working on a farm, you know that you're going to live and work on that farm all your life if you're going to be successful. And you're probably going to pass that farm on from generation to generation. And that's the only thing that's going to make the next generation successful, is that you passed on something that you did. And it's not exactly easy to go and start something from scratch, because when we started our business in 1978, I think there was 3 of us guys that started it, and I think we had $30,000 or $35,000 between us. And we had to build up receivables, and we had to pay our bills, we had to establish credit and everything. So those first 3 years were very difficult. And I can remember one Christmas when we didn't really have a lot of money, because we were in that process of building things. And somebody gave us for Christmas $250 a piece. And the only requirement they had of that gift was, someday when we see somebody that's starting a business and struggling in a business, we pass it on and do the same thing for them. And I think that was, you know, that was a very good lesson. And we appreciated that very much. And we knew how hard that we were having at that time. And it was a good lesson. And I think that you don't give up, you know, if you're a young entrepreneur. And I think you don't get greedy. You can get greedy and you can destroy your business. And I think that as a young entrepreneur, I think that you have to realize you put back aside a certain percentage of your gross into an account that you may someday say, okay, this is what I've reap from this business that I started. Or someday when your business may be struggling because business may be bad, you can put that into your business and you can maybe save your business, which might be then worth a lot of money someday. But you don't get greedy.
Let me ask you this, you said you started with 2 other folks. Did you buy them out? Do you own the business now? To restate the question, who owns the business now?
I own 51% of the business, and I have one of the partners that's left. One of the partners left, and we bought him out, and he's a railroad engineer today. He stayed for 10 years after we bought him out.
Wait, so you own 51% now?
Yes.
Okay.
We started out 33% each.
So what does the other partner do? What do you do?
I basically am the president of the company, and I pretty well take care of all the business side of the company. my partner Bill, he takes care of the shop side of the business, and he's been a good partner because he hasn't been in there driving the business or anything, but he also hadn't interfered. So I guess when you look at partners, there's different qualities that make somebody a good partner.
Did you originally own 51% of the business?
No, I owned 33% of the business originally.
Okay. I had a client that had 3 partners who each owned 33%, but they had a rule that if one partner vetoed it, they had to kill whatever the decision was. So they couldn't overrule him or whatever stuff they did. We could probably talk all day about horror stories.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about the good stuff about being an entrepreneur that most people don't learn about in school. Specific. Give me an example of how your organization changed someone's life that if they worked for GM, they might not have had that opportunity.
Yeah, I can't say that I could point out any specific thing that I developed a business friend that we went through, in 2001. There was a lot of Chapter 11s that were happening, and we probably, there were several companies that stuck us for, I don't know, it was probably $500,000 or so in bankruptcies and stuff. And I had a friend that came to me that I was a business partner, and I had helped him before in business and when he was struggling and having a difficult time. And he came to me and said that if you need some help, just let me know. And so we got into a dispute on a valve that agreement that we had made with a foreign company. And I spent probably $500,000 or so in lawyer fees and stuff fighting this. And he came to me and told me that, and I went to him and said, "Did you really mean that?" And he said, "Absolutely." And he wrote me a check for $370,000 without a signature or anything from me, and I paid him back within a 3 to 5 year period,
so
and paid him interest.
He had your back if you ever needed it?
Yep. He saved us at that point. That saved the company, and because this company was determined to put us out of business. And so today, that particular part of our business was a valve operation, which we sold that valve operation to 2 of our employees, and that's probably got 55 or 60 people working, and they've kept the business in their area and everything, and we still do their engineering for them today.
Why should someone be an entrepreneur?
You have the ability, you shouldn't waste it, and if you have the desire and the ability to do something, you should not waste that quality. You should explore it and do the best you can do with it, and you should, there's a lot of people that don't have it, and this world would not run very well without entrepreneurs.
So how does a man or woman know if they would be a good entrepreneur?
I think you learn that fairly quick. You get started somewhere to work, and you're all at once somebody's saying, I'd like for you to be a supervisor, I'd like for you to take this responsibility, and you have the desire to take that responsibility. It's not like, well, geez, I'd do that for just the money or something. You have a desire to do that, and you owe it to everybody else if that's an ability you have to do it.
Okay.
Succeed at something, then maybe somebody could judge you. I've had interviews before when I was, before I started my own business and stuff. I do terrible on a written test to evaluate me, and probably worse than most people. And don't ask me why, but I do. And yet I probably would be able. You give me 25 to 50 people, and I can generate a lot of profit and good results, and have a happy group of people. And I'm capable, and I know now we're up to 70. We've been up to 170 people. I know that there is a limit for where I have to rely on other people to help me, because I can't handle more than a certain number of people and do the job that I'm capable of doing, and doing it well.
A couple of things I've learned about entrepreneurs, or some that have failed, some that have succeeded. One is, just because you do something well doesn't mean you can run a company that does that well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I think a lot of people fall into that trap. Another is that I know a lot of serial entrepreneurs, people that have started 4, 5, 6 companies and sold them out for millions of dollars, and upwards of $1 billion. And one gentleman I know thought he was Superman, and he started going to executive program that Harvard offered for business owners, managers, or partners, and he realized that
He wasn't
totally wrong.
Superman.
No, he realized his next idea was totally wrong, you know. But he would have, without that outside guidance, he wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
I think I'm recording this, so I'll ask you, who do you look for advice in instances where you can't talk to your employees or even people in your
Operation.
Yeah, or even vendors or people in your industry. You know what I mean? 'Cause
Yeah.
you don't,
I serve on a board of directors for a company in Syracuse, New York, and they've got a company in Buffalo, New York, and they've got a company in Syracuse, and we've been friends for many, many years. The owner of that company, and along with me on the board of directors is a manager of Overton Gear in Chicago, and then X-Tex in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I mean, these guys they're $100+ million a year companies, so they see a lot more than I see. And being on that board of directors, we meet quarterly, and I see a lot of the business picture that I wouldn't see otherwise. So I rely on them, for seeing what are they seeing, and because they see it from a bigger perspective or a bigger business area than I do. And so I think they help me a lot, and hopefully I help them some, keeping them down to earth and the practical common sense approach to what we do. And we have an excellent banking group that we bank with, and those guys, all the way up to the president of the bank and everything, the group of banks, he took a special interest in
Which
Delta
bank?
Chemical Bank. They're out of Michigan. And
still called Chemical?
Yeah, it's still called Chemical Bank. It used to be NBD Bank, but it's Chemical Bank.
National Bank of Detroit?
Yeah, but it's Chemical Bank now, and so those guys have been great with us, and every once in a while I'll sit down with them and have we'll go out to dinner or something, and they always tell you the picture they see and what they are thinking is going to happen with the money situation and the business situation, and that's helpful. So we got and then we had a real good CPA that was in South Bend, Indiana. That was he was a good advisor that I really relied on for a long time. But then he got sick and cancer and died, and but he helped me a lot to learn a lot about the business side and the accounting side of business and everything. So I've been pretty fortunate in the people that I've got to know in the business world over the years and everything, and have usually, if I don't know something, I know who to go and find out.
Tell me about your older brother Gerald.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me like I've never met him and don't know anything about him.
What?
And I haven't talked to your other brothers and sisters about Gerald, except for maybe one or two. But tell me about Gerald.
Well, I spent quite a bit of time with Gerald, and Gerald and I sort of grew up together. He was 2 years older than me, and some of the things that I remember about that process was when I was probably 14 and he was 16 or somewhere in that range. Dad came to both of us. He knew we were sneaking around and smoking and stuff. And he said, "Boys, it's not good for you. And tell you what I'll do. I'll give you $20 each if you'll quit smoking and promise me that you'll quit, And so he did. And Gerald did quit for a while, but he started back, and I quit and stayed quit. And I think that probably had a lot to do with their health and in later life and stuff. But at that time, I don't think anybody realized that smoking was as bad as it was for especially somebody that maybe in their family heart problems were fairly common and stuff. And I think if we would have known, and if he would have known, I think he probably would have took it more serious. But he was at his funeral. I think he was 46 when he died, and at his funeral they labeled him the Good Samaritan, and I think that was a good title for him. The things that I remember about him is that he would give you the shirt off of his back, and if he needed it, he would ask you for the shirt off of your back, and it was a fair exchange, And I think that there wouldn't have been anything that he wouldn't have done for any of his family or anybody else, as a matter of fact, because I think he was like my dad a lot. Except maybe just a little bit wilder, and I think that it was we had a lot of experiences together. That was we lived in Michigan and rented a house together. When he got married, then I stayed with him for a little while after he got married, and then I got my own house and everything. But I got to know the family, his family, pretty good, and as well as you could and everything, and I think it just made us closer. But then after he'd went through his marriage there and everything, he moved back here, and I was in Michigan then, and my other brother, Ronald, came to Michigan, and he went to work with me at Henco, and so we sort of had a time together. We didn't house together or anything, but we did spend time together, because that was a long distance, from Michigan to Alabama, and that was like a 600-mile trip, and usually that was a twice-a-year thing that we would see our whole family here and everything. So Gerald was, I think that was a good title that they gave him.
Gerald's daughter lost her father when she was 22, which will be coming up on 30 years, a couple of years. Tell me about how Gerald felt about Alicia and their relationship.
Oh, he loved her to death, there was no doubt about that, and I think I could understand that, being a parent, and I don't. There's something about your daughter being having your heart, and everything, and you could really tell that from Jurel, and I think that Alicia definitely, had his heart and everything, and I think that he was. I think she cared a lot about him, and he cared a lot about her. That was too bad, that she lost him at that young age and everything, because I'm sure there was a lot for each of them to learn about each other.
Gerald has 2 granddaughters and a great-grandchild. What would you like them to know about their great-grandfather and great-grandfather?
He was, Ryan and KT, I think that, there's, I think anybody that you talk to could tell you that you missed a lot by not having him around. And I think that you do have grandparents, and I think you would have enjoyed him, and I think he would have enjoyed you very much. There would have been a lot of love there, between them, no doubt.
Yeah, I miss him.
Yeah.
I only knew him about 6 months, maybe 9. Well, thanks for your time.
Well, you're welcome.